The email arrived like a sniper's bullet, aimed straight for the heart. 13 years reduced to a file size under 500 kilobytes. No explanations, no trailing emotions, just a sterile attachment and a cold, clinical subject line. Divorce papers. I was miles away, a soldier in a sand-swept hellscape, fighting enemies sworn to destroy me. Yet the most dangerous ambush came from within my own home. She emptied our joint account with a click and left a hollow pit where love used to reside. In a mere moment, the life we'd built vanished, evaporated like the heat haze in the desert. My combat gear felt heavier as gravity pulled down a new weight: betrayal. This was where grief collided with a gnawing injustice. I was duty-bound, yet abandoned. The turmoil suffocated, but I couldn't afford to react. Soldiers don't scream in anguish. They endure. I wouldn't be the emotional wreck she might have hoped to see. Silence could be a weapon, and I would wield it with precision. No reply was the reply. She anticipated chaos. Instead, I offered the funeral silence of my resolve. Every word unspoken, every emotional outburst carefully calculated to remain concealed. My pain morphed into a laser-sharp focus. I began to strategize, turning my grief into a quiet, methodical pursuit of understanding family law, asset tracing, digital forensics. Logic became my arsenal. Her posts on social media flickered like shadows, flaunting a lifestyle purchased with stolen memories. Each pristine image was a breadcrumb leading me deeper into the trap I would set. She dug her own grave while I observed from the dark. I embraced my patience. Revenge doesn't rush. It waits for the right moment, the pivotal misstep. When I finally struck, it would be from the shadows. Legal channels would be my battlefield. I would freeze her assets. Her ill-gotten gains would not slip away unchallenged. The satisfaction of watching her world destabilize would be my armament. No fireworks, just a methodical execution devoid of emotional chaos. She received the mail this time, not from me, but from a lawyer she never foresaw. The markers of her former comfort now hovered over her like a storm cloud, casting long, dark shadows. And in that silence, I found control. In the absence of chaos, I prepared for reclamation, my hands clean as the courtroom ruled in my favor. A strange peace settled in, harmonizing with the reckoning I had orchestrated. She had called it unfair. I now called it arithmetic. Betrayal had ignited a fire, but it was my turn to wield the flame silently and justly. I returned from the desert, the empty house reflecting the emptiness she chose. No welcoming banner, just my solitude and a bank account finally intact, free from bleeding. In this quiet aftermath, I had not just survived. I had emerged reborn, relentless, and ready to reclaim every part of what she sought to destroy. I logged into our bank account, fingers trembling against the hardened keyboard, the screen loaded with the weight of impossibility. $0 stared back as if mocking my trust. I was fighting enemies abroad, while the enemy at home had emptied our future like a competitive gambler cashing out. My heart raced, but it brought no warmth, only the chill of hollow disbelief. The weight of betrayal was heavier than my combat gear. 13 years, gone with the click of a mouse. Love replaced by a void so vast it threatened to consume me. Yet, even in that moment, I felt a new clarity emerging. Rage and heartbreak were not my allies. Logic would be my weapon. I pushed the pain aside. Emotions aren't just liabilities, they're vulnerabilities. In war, revealing your hand invites disaster. I took a breath, resolved not to react. She expected an explosion, a furious response. I would give her silence, an abyss of calm that would render her chaos trivial. Days passed with her silence, too. I watched through the screens, her life meticulously curated for social media, staged and constructed with the debris of our shared past. Each post a boast of unchecked opulence, funded by our stolen finances. A lavish dinner here, a new wardrobe there. I counted her violations like tally marks, evidence building behind a curtain of indifference. Silence wasn't weakness. It was the luxury of waiting. I initiated contact with a network of veterans, slowly piecing together a strategy. I learned family law, asset tracing, digital forensics. My evenings were spent buried in literature that sharpened my mind while dulling the ache in my heart. I grew to embrace the role of the tactician. It was transformative. Pain was cannibalized into purpose, my grief morphing into resolve. Every social media update from her became another data point, another thread in the tapestry of her downfall. She reveled in her new life, unaware that everything she cherished was being watched, calculated. I welcomed her ignorance. It was the first part of the trap. Her confidence would lead her straight into the jaws of a predator that had silently prepared for an inevitable kill. I hadn't truly lost everything. I was merely biding time, orchestrating my return. The calm before the storm was my ally. An amateur reacts. A refined strategist waits, poised for the moment of exploitation. The old adage echoed in my mind. Opportunity favors the prepared. And I would be ready. I immersed myself in the sterile glow of the laptop screen, storing the echoes of betrayal in the recesses of my mind. She thought she would bury me under the weight of chaos, that I would react with an outburst, a flurry of desperate emails filled with pain. Instead, I became a ghost, haunting the edges of her life as I transformed my grief into a shield. No reply was my reply. Days blurred into weeks, the silence amplifying the depth of my strategy. I meticulously dissected family law, memorized the nuances of asset tracing, and learned the rhythms of digital forensics, all during the mundane hours of military downtime. My fingers danced across pages, absorbing knowledge like a soldier honing his weapon. In the wake of betrayal, I found my purpose not in emotional upheaval, but in calculated resolve. Her social media posts were haunting silhouettes, each image a testament to her new existence, staged against the backdrop of stolen memories. I'd sit in the dim light of my barracks, scrolling through her updates, cataloging her excesses as she flaunted a life funded by my sacrifices. A getaway in Cabo, a glittering diamond ring, lavish dinners, a real-life fairy tale built upon the ashes of our life together. I collected evidence like trophies, letting her feel safe in her ill-gotten gains, unaware that her recklessness would lead her directly into a meticulously crafted trap. I silently reached out to a network of fellow veterans, a coalition of legal minds and financial experts. The shadows were my allies, and in the dim light of correspondence, I built a team that would execute my plan with surgical precision. A forensic accountant came into play, one who could unravel her deceptions and expose the financial crimes she so brazenly committed. They functioned as my silent army, working undercover while I remained a silhouette in the distance. I carefully constructed a web of information while maintaining a facade of indifference. Each conversation felt like a blade carefully honed, preparing for the moment it would strike. The luxury of silence became my greatest ally. I welcomed the numbness and refined my focus. Emotion was a liability. Intelligence was my arsenal. I packed mine tightly, ready for the execution phase. The night before I filed the motion felt electric, charged with the weight of anticipation and patience. I visualized each step ahead, the way a sniper anticipates the perfect shot. Tomorrow would mark the turning point. My hands would not tremble when they hit the keyboard. They'd be steady, confident, each keystroke echoing with silent strength. Let the storm clouds gather. I would not be caught in the rain. She believed I would drown in sorrow, but I would rise above it all, a phoenix emerging from the ashes of my past life, ready to enact a quiet annihilation. No chaos, just precision. I smiled at the thought of her confusion, her unwitting submission to a fate she had never seen coming, set against the backdrop of her glamorous facade. Even in the dark, shadows could move with purpose, eyes with unblinking clarity. I dove deeper into the arcane world of family law, the sterile language and complex statutes slowly stripping away the emotions I had anchored to the betrayal. I transformed from a victim into a tactician, methodically parsing every ounce of legislation that could be my arsenal in this war. By day, I was still a soldier, still fighting in a foreign land, yet my mind was a battlefield of legalese and strategy, tirelessly working late into the night, illuminated only by the cold glow of my screen. Einstein once said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over while expecting different results. I understood that now. Each moment spent sulking in emotional chaos was a moment stolen from my plan. So I transformed that pain into purpose, quenching the flames of anger under the weight of calculated resolve. With each legal document I analyzed, I packed my arsenal tighter. Her digital footprints became a source of voyeuristic data. Each post slipped fluidly through my fingers like sand, yet they fortified my resolve. A lavish dinner, a decadent trip to Europe, a diamond ring glistening in the sun, all funded by the ashes of our life. I studied them with meticulous intent, recognizing every extravagance as a ledger entry against her future stability. This was my battlefield now, each snapshot a step closer to her inevitable downfall. Readied myself to send my first inquiry to a forensic accountant, a silent partner in my operation. I type a simple message, conveying my intent and need for expertise, fingers flying across the keyboard, while the military barracks pulsed with the hustle of camaraderie outside, unaware of the storm building within me. I detached from emotional chaos. To me, emotions were now mere liabilities, exposed flaws in a heavily fortified strategy. The luxury of silence had become my most potent weapon. I observed her basking in her new life, but I also understood the inception of her delusion. With every boastful update, she believed she was invincible. Little did she know, she was painting her own eviction notice, each brag a link in the chain that would bind her to pain. Patience was my virtue now, and every piece of knowledge gained was another domino set in the intricate pattern of her demise. I struck a network of veterans, exchanging lessons learned and legal insights, curating advice with surgical precision. Each connection fortified my base, building a fortress around my tactic, ensuring each command remained silent, unseen. The day loomed closer when I would lay my first move on the board. Anticipation hummed beneath my skin like a low-grade fever. I visualized the moment clearly, the motion I would file, demanding asset freezes, contesting every misappropriated cent that slipped through her fingers. It would be clinical, unyielding, and silent. As I sipped my lukewarm coffee, I imagined her expression upon receiving the documentation, surprise flaring in her eyes, an unsettling anxiety creeping up the spine, an echo of her past chaos creeping back in. She'd realized just then that her reckless choices had sown seeds of her own demise. As I prepared to unleash my counteroffensive, I felt the weight of anticipation solidify into a subtle force, a certainty that pulsed within me. Revenge, I understood, doesn't announce itself loudly. It coldly calculates, methodically unfurling like a well-planned ambush. Each move I made was a counterstrike against her ignorance. Tomorrow, she would receive news. News not from me, but from a lawyer in a tailored suit, reminding her that consequences do not vanish into thin air. The dominoes were poised and ready. All that remained was for her to tip the first one. And when that happened, I would be there, a whisper in the shadows, watching the quiet unraveling of the illusion she had so carelessly built. I watched her build a castle on a fault line, each brick a consequence carefully ignored. In her new life, she splurged without restraint, flaunting her riches like war trophies, Instagram posts becoming her public confessions, a sun-drenched vacation, heels clicking against marble floors, all while my images flickered in the corners of her memory, haunting yet muted. It was surreal, almost grotesque, to see her celebrating with the spoils of our shared existence, each moment captured while I remained a ghost in her narrative. Every cocktail shared, every smile posed, was an echo of the life we had once built together, now distorted into a mockery. She had taken my trust, turned it into lavish dinners, designer dresses, and vacations that had once been our dreams. I studied her from the shadows, a predator circling its prey, savoring the ammunition she unknowingly offered. Her lavish lifestyle, financed by the remnants of our union, was a series of markers leading me deeper into the trap I would set. I shifted from bitterness to bemusement, watching with a cold detachment as she relished in her perceived safety. Each post was a golden ticket, revealing not just her frivolous adventures, but also the secret, slowly unfolding narrative I would soon unleash. I mused over her celebration of life, remembering how blind confidence always precedes a fall. The more she flaunted, the more I prepared. Her arrogance was my advantage, and I reveled in the strategic distance I maintained. Days turned into weeks, and I continued to gather evidence of her transgressions, threads weaving a tapestry of her downfall. She remained blissfully ignorant, believing she was untouchable, secure atop her precariously built fortress made of deceit. With each conquest she shared, I felt the power shift slowly, inexorably in my favor, my silent resolve crystallizing like morning ice on a battlefield. The anticipation simmered within me, a potent cocktail of patience and control. I could almost taste the satisfaction that awaited as I laid the groundwork, contacting a veterans legal network, recruiting a forensic accountant skilled in disentangling deceit. These were my unseen allies, working diligently while I continued to act the part of the forgotten husband, the life lost in unceremonious emails. She felt safe in her dreamy illusion, not realizing the storm clouds had already begun to gather. I would remain hidden in plain sight, letting her dig her own grave. Soon, she would awaken to the realization that her fortress was built on shaky ground. The walls would crumble, and I would be there, an architect of silent vengeance, watching her dreams dissolve into dust, every flashy post a ghost of her impending reckoning. I remembered that silence was my weapon, my refuge from the chaos she had initiated. In that stillness, I found dominion. The time to act was approaching, and I would strike from the shadows, each blow calculated, devoid of emotion. She would soon find that the comfort of her lavish lifestyle carried a heavy price, one she wouldn't escape unscathed. As I watched her revel in her ill-gotten gains, I felt the calm within me sharpen, ready to unleash an ideology that would return the equation to balance, reminding her that consequences do not fade. They simply lay in wait, marked by the footprints of greed. I initiated contact with the veteran's legal network, my fingers gliding over the keyboard like a well-trained soldier sneaking through enemy lines. Each keystroke was deliberate, a quiet pipeline feeding me information about asset protection and forensic accounting. My plan was finally in motion, flowing smoothly like water through a well-laid conduit. I felt a surge of satisfaction. I had transformed from discarded husband to master strategist, meticulously calculating every angle. Then, the horizon shifted, one blip in my peripheral vision that cracked the calm facade, a notification. Text, a new app I hadn't anticipated, her voice now a silken whisper through my phone, a simple message, innocuous enough. "Hey, can we talk?" The screen glowed, imprinted with her name, a fleeting reminder of everything I'd left behind. My heart did not quicken with panic, but it did flicker with the threat of disruption. I sat still, a statue forged in the grief of a ghost who had already buried his past. The evening air hung heavy in the barracks, thick with the weight of my thoughts. What if this wasn't simply a form of weak reconciliation? What if she'd noticed the calculated absence, the rising shadows of my plan? Vulnerability was not something I could afford. The silence I'd wielded like a blade felt suddenly precarious, its edges dulled by the unpredictability of human emotion. I took a measured breath, focusing on the gravity of knowledge I had amassed and the path I had carved. Panic had no place here. Instead, my mind recalibrated. A knife didn't shatter when it met an obstacle. It was sharpened, honed to a finer edge. I thought of her lavish posts, each a beacon of misplaced confidence. She expected me to crumble, to respond like the emotional wreck she'd sought to create. But that wasn't me anymore. I was a tactician, watching her through the lens of strategy, assessing her every move. Perhaps this message was a simple play for a soft lifeline, but maybe it was something darker. She could sense the impending storm gathering around her and sought to bridle me back into submission. Numbers floated in my mind, calculating percentages, estimating futures. I'd pored over her digital footprints, tracing each extravagant step into an abyss that seemed inviting only from a distance. As my pulse slowed, I drafted my response. Not a reply, but an acknowledgement of her existence, brief and devoid of depth. Sure. When? With that, the needle of control shifted back into place. I'd reinforced my resolve, applying further pressure against the emotional fissures she thought she could exploit. I watched the blue dots hover above her message as she typed. Patience, my sharpest weapon, remained at the forefront. There was no rush to react. I would choose the territory of battle, and today it was one of measured restraint. I eyed the details surrounding me, the cargo containers piled high, the hum of machinery in the distance, mental maps of her life juxtaposed sharply against the gritty reality of mine. I was still a soldier, yes, but I was also an architect of vengeance, each piece falling neatly into place like chess pieces awaiting their turn. Still, this sudden complication pricked at my gut, an unwelcome reminder that the guise of control could fracture with a single crack. Thoughts churned. Could I miscalculate? Did she hold an unexpected ally? Numbers I pushed those doubts aside. I had the advantage of foresight, and any sense of risk would be met with re-strategizing. I crafted my message, succinct, measured, a hunter waiting in the dark. Tomorrow afternoon. As I pressed send, her shadow stretched further into my territory. Each move from here would be made in silence, a whisper against her cacophony of noise. I didn't fear her. I respected the unpredictability that came with betrayal. I was ready to readjust, to recalibrate. Just as a blade sharpens against steel, so too would I refine my approach, ensuring the edge of my strategy remained deadly as ever. Control was mine again. The shadow was deepened, tension hung like smoke curling in the air, and I leaned back unperturbed. Tomorrow awaited. The game resumed. I placed my hands on the keyboard with a steady resolve, each keystroke meticulously orchestrated as I prepared to unleash a calculated strategy, one that would ripple through the fabric of her life like a whispered echo in the stillness of night. The moment had arrived, the culmination of weeks spent honing legal knowledge, the art of forensic accounting, and the nuanced tactics of asset protection. With every detail locked into place, I embraced the anticipation, a soldier familiar with the calm just before the storm. The motion was straightforward, but devastating in its simplicity. I would initiate the legal processes to freeze her accounts, challenge the division of assets, and submit the evidence of her financial misconduct, all carefully documented and ready for scrutiny. A precise strike, cold and unemotional, designed to catch her off guard. She believed she held the upper hand, flaunting her newfound life, but her arrogance was my camouflage, a miscalculation I would exploit ruthlessly. With the click of a button, I sent the documents to the court. The quiet satisfaction that washed over me was profound, a calculated euphoria compared to the raw, chaotic storms of emotion she had once hoped to unleash in me. I imagined the moment she would see the letter, the jolt of panic that would seize her as reality crashed in, disrupting her carefully curated facade. I would not be the destruction she anticipated. I was now the architect, dismantling her empire with the elegance of a precision strike. In the solitude of my workspace, the barracks faded into oblivion. The noise around me felt distant, the chaos of my military life replaced by the clarity of purpose. I envisioned her face when the mail arrived, not from me, but from a lawyer she never saw coming. The dread of realization would flicker across her features, the veneer of confidence she wore, like so many facades before, shattered before her eyes. The screen, now filled with information about submitted motions and court dates, became my battlefield, a canvas where I painted each move in silence. I felt the power surge through me, not in loud proclamations, but in the serene knowledge that I controlled the narrative now. I transformed every ounce of pain into savvy maneuvering, the sharp edges of betrayal honed into a blade poised to strike. Time stretched like the desert horizon that once separated my two lives, one of sacrifice, honor, duty, and the other distorted by betrayal and greed. Each tick of the clock was a reminder that patience was a weapon best wielded by the wise. I was no longer a victim shackled to an emotional wreck. I was a quiet storm, gathering energy as I plotted her downfall. As night deepened its hold, I visualized every detail: her lavish dinners, the designer clothes, the charade funded by the remnants of our shared existence. Each indulgence, a splinter in her armor, and soon they would break through. I, the sniper hidden in the shadows, had prepared for this moment. She danced around in her castle of gold, unaware of the fault lines crisscrossing beneath, ready to collapse with the right push. The finality of my actions brought a strange sense of solace. I didn't need the loud declaration of revenge. The quiet art of dismantling her delusional realm was already underway. She would understand then, in the stark light of reality, that actions carry consequences, that choices, made in haste, wrapped in greed, can unravel the very fabric of a life built on deceit. I exhaled, the tension releasing like air from a deflating balloon. Tomorrow would arrive, and with it, the first tremors of her reckoning. I had not merely survived the betrayal. I emerged renewed, a testament to the power of silence over chaos. In that stillness, I crafted a legacy, not defined by loss but by the mastery of control, a weapon born from the ashes of emotional disaster, aimed squarely at her newfound facade. And in the aftermath, I would reclaim not just what was mine, but reshape my very identity in the crucible of vengeance transformed into strategy. The storm was on the horizon, an oppressive silence thickening the air around her. I could see it through my screen, the pixelated facade of her curated life now trembling under the weight of anticipation. Each post she shared was a distraction, a shining distraction masking the inevitable unraveling that hovered just beyond her reach. She was stranded on her carefully built island, blissfully unaware that the tide was about to turn. I imagined her life with him, her new fiancé, who, like a ship sailing through clear waters, was blissfully ignorant of the storm brewing just below the surface. Fog obscured his vision while my shadows danced just out of sight, eager to break the tranquility of their presence. Truly, comfort borrowed on stolen time carries a steep interest. She was treading on borrowed ground, each day more perilous than the last. Soon, she'd be forced to pay. The cost of arrogance would reveal itself. As the clock ticked forward, I prepared to watch her institutions collapse like sandcastles against the surging tide. The documents that had just left my hands were like rocks cast into the stillness, sending ripples that would reach every corner of her world. I embraced that stillness, a predator circling its prey, and relished the fading certainty that enveloped her new life. It was only a matter of time before she discovered the dark clouds looming over her bright facade. A legal storm on the horizon. She'd probably noticed the sudden uptick in my social media silence, how easily I slipped into the shadows. They say silence speaks volumes, and I had no intention of breaking that quiet. She expected a response, a rekindling of an emotional thread she so casually severed. Instead, she would receive a letter, a true harbinger of the truth she refused to acknowledge. In the weeks that followed, I remained aloof while assembling the evidence of her extravagant spending. Each new purchase acted as a countdown, an unknowing confession accumulating interest towards her reckoning day. My heart thudded with anticipation each time a picture of her and her new life flickered across my screen, morphing into a countdown clock, a timer ticking down toward her inevitable reveal. I envisioned their days together, painting the picture of their happiness while the shadows stretched longer behind them. How fleeting it all was. Ignorance may be bliss, but reality knocks with a catastrophic weight. My comfort came from watching her self-created mirage, the opulent lifestyle she so boldly displayed on platforms she thought were her refuge. Then came the tipping point, the day her fiancé, the unsuspecting pawn in this malignant game, would open the letter that held the power to shatter their world. He would stare down at the legal jargon, the meticulous evidence of her financial misconduct, the tides shifting hard against her. Would he understand the depths of the betrayals? Would it sink in that she had gambled away everything on her whimsy, stored all her secrets in plain sight, yet felt perfectly insulated from the chaos she thought was past? The naivete was palpable. Images of her face struck with shock filled my thoughts, a mirror reflecting the confusion she had once crafted to gaslight me into believing my worthlessness. Panic would grip her, and her carefully constructed life would teeter on the edge. In that moment, I wouldn't have to say anything. My silence and the weight of the legal truth would do the work for me. As the final act of this dark theater approached, I felt the thrill of power, a coolness emanating like a blade poised just above her throat. The anticipation hung heavy, electrifying the atmosphere, pushing the air thick like fog before a rainstorm. She thought herself safe, insulated in her illusions, without realizing how tightly I had stitched the fabric of her reality to the impending storm. Patience had been my weapon. Now it was time for accountability to take its turn. Her world was about to crack, and within that fracture I would find solace. I would watch her illusions fall and revel in the sweet taste of calm justice, quiet, poignant, and undeniably potent. As I settled deeper into the shadows, I understood the depths of what she would soon face. A reckoning neither of us had anticipated, but one she had undeniably invited. Her message hovered like a specter in the dim glow of my phone, a reminder that she believed there was a bridge left to cross. "Hey, can we talk?" A seemingly innocent inquiry, colder than I'd expected, fragile like glass. She was reaching out, desperate perhaps, trying to flicker life into the smoldering remnants of our past. Each word dripped with threads of guilt wrapped in arrogance, as if she were trying to reopen doors she had welded shut with betrayal. I stared at the screen, devoid of a pulse, a moment suspended as I sifted through the implications. The insatiable need to respond gnawed at me, like the sensation of a phantom limb. I could almost hear her voice cracking through the distance, the quaver of uncertainty weaving itself into her bravado. But the gravity of betrayal was a void too profound to traverse. I felt a sense of absolute clarity, a cutting insight like a sniper's breath before the shot. No conclusions needed to be drawn. I was not offering her the comfort that she sought. No room for reconciliation here. The parameters had shifted, irrevocably. My silence was the echo of her decisions, glaring over the abyss she had forged. The quiet thrill coursed through me, knowing she was unaware of what encroached upon her new life, an unseen storm gathering strength with every passing moment. "Sure. When?" I typed with the same cool precision, the same keystrokes now infused with the gravity of my plan. No more warmth, only matter-of-fact acceptance that allowed me to willingly lead her into the snare I had meticulously crafted. Let her play at bravado while I navigated the shadows, a cool architect of her unraveling. Her expected response came quickly, an anxious flurry of details, tentative, wanting, offering the proverbial lifeline while grappling with the unseen weight of the legal reality closing in. Tomorrow afternoon, orchestrated carefully, to coincide with the moment her fiancé would discover the letter that would be a reckoning. Images of the exchange danced in my mind. I pictured her, confident yet uncertain, standing in her lavish surroundings, unaware of how fleeting that comfort was. Tomorrow, he would read the cold, hard truth, a taut legal document lined with meticulous evidence, a mirror reflecting her extravagant lifestyle financed by deceit. Her entire world, built on the shifting sands of her greed, would begin to tremble. I smiled to myself, the anticipation crackling in the air. The thought of her mounting panic, mirrored in the imaginations of her fiancé, was now my reality. Would he recognize her duplicity, or would he still be a pawn, caught in her web? It didn't matter. The plan was coming to fruition, that beautiful harmony of control humming beneath the surface. Tomorrow was no longer just another day. It would be a punctuation mark, a clean shift that severed the tendrils of illusion that she had held so dearly. The sniper's hold grew tighter. In those quiet moments before chaos, I found the calm of predatory precision. My heart beat steadily, untroubled, as if the world around me held its breath, waiting for a single, lethal click. One calculated move away from shattering the opulence she thought she cherished. This was not vengeance. This was justice forged in silence, a reckoning set against her arrogance. The final piece of the trap clicked into place, a quiet satisfaction enveloping me as I prepared for the inevitable fallout. She had used my trust as a springboard into delusion, and now reality would reinstate its dominance in the coldest of fashions. I leaned back into the shadows, a patient observer waiting for dawn to break. The quiet was mine to wield, a steadying force against her crumbling facade. Tomorrow would be a gift of clarity. Nothing would be lost in translation. The message was clear, and I would make sure it resonated profoundly. As I shut my eyes, I imagined her awakening to the storm's fury, a calm before an unyielding tide. Silence had always been my greatest weapon. Now, it would be my finest hour. The day had arrived, the calm before the inevitable confrontation. The quiet vibrations of the approaching storm rippled through my consciousness as I observed her fabricated life flickering through a digital screen. Each post, a proclamation of opulence, disguised her growing anxiety, unaware that the very foundation she danced upon was about to shift beneath her. With a steady precision, I pushed the send button, launching my documents into the legal ether. The motion to freeze her accounts was instantaneous, but the real annihilation was still to come. I envisioned the moment her new fiancé would break the seal on the envelope, the well-tailored suit contrasting sharply with the rough edges of undeniable truth. Inside would be the meticulously organized evidence of her financial misdeeds, a testament to the treachery that had led to my silent upheaval. I reveled in the thought. It struck me suddenly how fragile the life she flaunted was, a display of wealth built on the remnants of a shared past she thought she could erase. Her confidence had morphed into a compelling delusion. She had assumed my silence was weakness, but I had transformed that silence into a calculated weapon. I imagined her reaction as she unfolded the papers. I could almost see the lines of her brow knit together in confusion, disbelief taking root as awareness surged through her. Each piece of evidence I had mercilessly collected would serve as a mirror to reflect her choices back at her, a reflection of all she had so carelessly dismantled. Her world, meticulously framed in curated snapshots, was about to fracture. I felt an almost eerie calm as I reflected on the cascading consequences awaiting her. Moments of clarity often use a lens of devastation to reveal their truths. Would she crumble under the weight of her own arrogance? Would the illusion she crafted dissolve into panic? The visualizations of her confusion played out in my mind, a morbid ballet against the backdrop of her golden days, where glitz and pride would transform into guilt and mortification. Hours passed like heartbeats on death row, the anticipation a glut of cold steel running through my veins. My phone buzzed, a notification. It was her, an anxious inquiry, perhaps a feeble attempt to break through the silence, a thin thread she thought might tether me back. "Can we talk?" The words, soft and brittle, dripped with desperation, each letter a reminder of the doors she had slammed shut with an unwavering ruthlessness. I contemplated my response, letting the silence stretch, letting her wonder. My fingers moved expertly to reply, "Sure." "When?" The simplicity of my response bared no warmth, only the calculation of a hunter inducting its prey into a false sense of security. "Tomorrow afternoon," I thought, as I watched her profile glimmer with invitations for another charade. Little did she know that her next performance would unravel, shattered by a single letter. The quiet satisfaction of knowing her impending reckoning provided a warmth I hadn't anticipated. As night draped itself over the barracks, I reflected on this moment, the culmination of months disguised as a soldier but actively wielding the armor of the strategist. The very tools she had used to destroy everything I held dear now posed their own threat against her. Sleeping quietly was nearly impossible, the thrill of anticipation coursing through me like electricity. This was justice, delivered with calm precision, far removed from the chaos she had unleashed. When the sun rose, it would bathe the world in light that would illuminate her smokescreen. She thought herself safe, but I had prepared for every shadow she cast. I would stand quietly, waiting to watch the disbelief wash over her like icy water. This moment of clarity wouldn't come loudly. It would murmur through her life like a ghost revealing hidden truths. She would finally grasp the consequences of treating my past with reckless abandon. Tomorrow would not just be another day, it would be a reckoning. In that truth, I found peace. The kind that emerged not from victory, but from the simple act of balancing the scales. I leaned back, indulging in the knowledge that all I had to do was let the silence speak volumes. Tomorrow, she would face the consequences of her choices, and I would be there to watch her illusions dissolve like sugar in rain. I stepped back, finally facing the remnants of what had been my life. The echoes of that cold email still reverberated in my mind, but now they felt distant, almost ethereal. A mirage of grief I was slowly learning to recognize as part of a past that could no longer harm me. I had returned from deployment to find my house empty, yet my conscience was vindicated, unmarred by the tumult that had unfolded. The walls were void of warmth, filled only with shadows of laughter that had long since faded. My footsteps echoed in the silence, the house a tomb of memories once vibrant but now muted. I had crafted every corner with thought, and now it was all barren, stripped to the bone, the soul purged. The irony didn't escape me. I had survived a war overseas, only to return to a battlefield created by my own spouse's betrayal. In that absence, I found an unexpected peace. It wasn't the joy of victory, but the solemnity of resolution. The same tranquility a soldier seeks after a fight. Gone was the urge for reconciling wounds, the longing for lost love. What was there to reclaim? She had taken it all and scattered the pieces, a new life with someone else built on theft and deception. Together they loomed over a fortress of lies, unaware that reality had already turned against them. No welcome home banner adorned my door. There would be no formalities. I had traded the chaos of my heart for a calculated distance, a cool calculation that had become my strongest ally. In this quiet aftermath, I searched my spirit for lingering resentment, but all that remained was determination, an ember turned firm resolve. They talk of the heart's betrayal, but mine had remained vigilant. It had stayed patient. I had built a fortress of control while she danced on the grave of our past, concocting illusions of happiness spun from my anguish. Watching her revel in that disingenuous freedom as I plotted didn't ignite rage. It became a meticulous spark guiding my every move. I had outmaneuvered her, watched her every flamboyant post collapse under the weight of a reckoning she never saw coming. As I surveyed the room, the empty walls felt like a newly painted canvas, no color of regret to stain them. I had become the architect of my own undoing, unearthing the clarity that retribution had birthed. Betrayal had forged me, but vengeance was not my endgame. It was merely a means of accountability. Her comfort, laden with stolen thrills, was now the anchor for her downward spiral. Revenge is not a display of power. It is the quiet correctness of recalibrating the scales. I had dismantled her narrative with cold precision, not in emotional outbursts, but in silent, decisive actions that spoke louder than any pitiful plea for forgiveness. I understood clearly. My strength was not in anger or destruction, but in the peaceful reclamation of self. There were doors shut behind me now, doors that would never reopen. I had crafted a life where I could move forward, embracing solitude as a friend rather than a foe. The road ahead was bare, stretching out like a whisper into an unknown future. But I was at peace with that silence. I stepped outside and looked towards the horizon, where the sun dipped beneath the physical scars of this war-torn moment, an epilogue written in tranquility. I relished the thought of moving forward, past the anguish that had threatened to consume me. It wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about mastering the art of letting go. As I walked away, leaving that empty house behind, each step echoing like finality, I understood that I had won. But more importantly, I was free. I had emerged from betrayal, not hollow but alive, ready to reclaim my existence. No longer weighed down by another's choices, I felt renewed, stripped of burden and free to write my own narrative. With the ghosts of the past finally laid to rest, I continued down that empty road, knowing it was mine to tread, silence guiding every step, power woven in the quiet resolve of a soul reborn.